Good evening, everybody. Welcome to yet another Friday Night Shit Show. I'm your host, Jason Almy. I have a very special episode for you this evening. It is Friday the 13th, as you already know. And on Friday the 13th, I like to watch Friday the 13th. I'm not one to buck tradition. I like to, I like to stick with tradition. I'm a traditional guy, right? Got hair on my pubis. I'm a traditional guy, red-blooded American, and I'm not going to argue with what the good Lord intended, which was for us to watch horror films on Friday the 13th. I don't think there's any reason to fight it, and so that's not what I'm here to do. I'm just here to drop my mouse so that I lose control. There we go. There we go. I lose control of the stream. Anyway, welcome one and all. The shit show, we haven't had a shit show in a while. I think the last one we did was some months back. My boy Jody B. Jay Bizzle for Shizzle joined me to watch the film Death to Smoochie. For the first time, I was watching it as a virgin with virgin eyes. I had never seen Death to Smoochie before. And, that's wild, but, also it is what it is. So, we haven't done one in a while, and the reason being is that these are relatively high effort shindigs. I like to make these film commentaries not like totally useless. I want to provide value with these film commentaries, and I hope you'll find value in this one. With film commentaries, there are a few basic types, but one of the worst kinds of film commentaries, in my opinion, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, is the film commentary where the commentator is essentially just narrating what's happening on screen, but like you have eyes. I'm assuming you're not blind. You're not watching the movie in Braille. You can fucking tell for yourself what's happening on screen. You are all smart people. If you're subscribed to this YouTube channel, if you're a patron, especially if you're a patron, you are an extremely intelligent individual. And so, you can see what's going on screen. I don't need to describe Jason doing the stabby motion into a young broad's bare chest. You know exactly what's happening. Of course you do. You've got a belt wrapped around your neck. You know what's happening. You know what's going on. I won't insult you. I'm going to try to provide some actual insight into the film and talk a little bit about it in a less formal way. I'm going to mention the F words and stuff like that. But last year, I think we only had one Friday the 13th last year, if I recall correctly. It was in October. And this year, we have not had a Friday the 13th yet. I believe this is the first Friday the 13th in all of 2024. We had to wait all the way to the middle of September to get a Friday the 13th. So on the last Friday the 13th, which was in 2023, I did a commentary for Friday the 13th, Part 1, the original film from 1980. And you will find that on this YouTube channel. If you scroll down, I'll link it in the comments below after this whole live shindig is over. I'll dig up the link and put it down there for you. And I'll also link it, for the patrons on Patreon as well, because it's uncovered. So I've already done part 1. It makes sense to roll on to part 2. We've got another Friday the 13th coming up in 2024 as well in December. December 13th is a Friday. So we got to decide if we want to do some kind of, Christmas themed horror film, or if we want to do Friday the 13th part 3. We'll have to check it out and see what's going on. Speaking of checking it out and seeing what's going on, I am going to observe my mixer behind me, which is very ill placed behind me, but I need to turn that level up so that I'll actually hear the film. Here we go. Stepping on this damn thing. Tell you what. Okay. So we're watching Friday the 13th part 2. This is historically kind of an important Friday the 13th. this is kind of where it went from becoming, a one-off film to like turning into kind of a franchise. And they had a choice for like what direction they wanted to take with this whole um, franchise, but ultimately they decided to make it like a straight sequel and sticking with like the characters and the storyline that they'd developed in the first one. So, referring to the chat, my dear friend, my amigo, Tom Bruno, my brother from another mother and co-host on the fine podcast by the name of New England Natives, Tom Bruno is telling me to take off my clothing, which is a suggestion that I'm typically okay with. That's normally, yeah, I'm open to that. However, YouTube will put the kibosh in the stream. We haven't even hit 10 minutes yet, and they'll pull the plug if I show a nip. So, Mr. Bruno, please let it be known, suffice it to say, that I am wearing nothing below the waist. It's just, I'm wearing a shirt and a little bit of flannel so that I can follow the YouTube rules. But I assure you that where the camera does not show, I am completely nude and fully torqued and ready for the experience of Friday the 13th Part 2. I'll talk more about Friday the 13th Part 2 while we watch it together. I do have to cover up the video. I mentioned YouTube yanking the stream. YouTube, they're such sticklers for their rules. They're such Puritans. They're such prudes. But they require that I not show you any copyrighted material, which Friday the 13th Part 2 is most definitely still copyrighted. So the problem with showing the video, which I'm totally going to do, is that I have to cover it. So I have to use a like fair use cover to cover up the majority of the video. You'll notice that I've been very creative. I spent time graphic designing the cover for the video. You'll see it in a moment. I'm sorry I have to cover it, but YouTube forces me to do so. You can watch this on your own at home. You can pop it in, or better yet, you can join the Patreon, teamalmy.com/support or patreon.com/teamalmy. They'll take you to the same web location where you can become a patron if you're not already. I will post this video with the video over here. We will be over here in a moment. I will post that uncovered for all of you filthy heathens that do not respect copyright law either, because I don't. I wish YouTube was a Chinese company because they don't respect copyright law either. So anyway, grab a drink. I have a little bit of Prime here. It was my birthday recently. My wife got me Prime. That's the only time I'm allowed to drink those like powder. I love the lemon lime stick packs of Prime. Small piece of trivia about me. They're delicious. And they're also expensive because they're $8. My wife won't let me buy them. But when it's my birthday, I get nice things like Prime. So that's what I'm drinking right here. Snuggled up by my fake fire. As you can see, I've got my fake fire behind me to keep me warm and cozy on this Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th, especially the first three, just strike me as like flannel movies. These are movies that they're like very flannel in my mind. They're like campfire flannel vibe. And I think it's very strong here in Part 2. We'll talk about that as we get into it. But I figure we're about almost 10 minutes deep into this stream. So we can go ahead and get cracking. Tom says kibosh sounds racist, but only if you're racist against the Polish. But we're not. We don't feel like the Polish. You can't be racist against Polacks. You can say whatever you want about them. I don't think kibosh is truly racist. We're gonna start calling it the K word. All right. I should not crunch this ice on the stream. I don't know why I'm doing that. I got an addiction to crunching ice. I love crunching ice. I shouldn't be doing it on stream. My apologies to everybody. Let's go ahead and get cracking on this movie here. We're going to pop this one up. Woo! Here we go. Let's make sure that we're at the beginning. That would be, yep, we are at the beginning. Let's go ahead and get cracking on this. And then I'm going to unfortunately have to bring up the overlay, guys. I'm very sorry. to have to do that, but Paramount will instruct YouTube to kick me right in the scrotum sack if I show you the movie. It's too bad. I feel like, commentary like this is transformative, and that's really the rule with fair use. However, fair use is one of those like defenses that you use when you're getting sued. It's not one of those things that prevents you from actually getting sued. So I'm not a lawyer and I don't have any expertise in the law, but I have read up about fair use because a lot of what I do is, in my opinion, fair use of these materials. But Paramount and YouTube generally tend to disagree with me, unfortunately. So it is what it is. I do appreciate Friday the 13th Part 2 for one kind of simple reason. And they do this in the Friday the 13th films. They start out with a little bit of like this recap. Here we got this one's not so much of a recap. This is like joining on with continuation of the first one. That is like a nice big old house. We see Alice from the first film, of course, and she's still traumatized from chopping off poor Pamela Voorhees's head, which I guess would traumatize a young woman. But we see that she's staying in this big house. Like they showed the exterior, of course, as they always do. They show exterior shots, and here we're seeing that she's dreaming of the events. It's sort of their creative way to incorporate the ending of the previous Friday the 13th film. And that has dual purposes that I appreciate. One is that, they want to remind viewers like, hey, this is what happened in the last one. And we're kind of picking up where we left off because this is 1981 and you motherfuckers don't have a VCR. You sure as shit don't have this on Blu-ray or streaming or anything like that. So keeping in mind the era, the idea that they're going to front load this film with copious flashbacks really does kind of, it's there for a purpose to remind idiots like, hey, you saw this last year. You probably haven't seen it since then. And you might have been half wasted at the drive-in trying to get a blowjob when you were like sort of half watching it. So like, here you go, numbnuts. This is what happened at the end of that movie. And this is why Alice is significant. I think if you just open up with Alice kind of having nightmares, sleeping on top of her sheets, which is an uncomfortable way to sleep, like no pillow on top of the sheets. How do you sleep like that? My 5-year-old sleeps like that too, and I don't get it. But she's so young, she doesn't even know how to sleep properly yet. Alice there is 20-something. She ought to know how to sleep by now. Sleep on the bed properly, lady. Get under the covers and use a pillow at the very least. I mean, look, my criticism still stands. Pamela Voorhees was an old lady, probably around, late 50s or 60, right there. And you hit her on the back with a fire poker. I'm not sure she's really getting up from that as an older woman. She's not a bodybuilder. It's not like she's been training physically for this for her whole life. It's not like a Rocky montage preceded that moment. I mean, she's just an old lady who's driven mad with her grief, which all makes sense. But, like physics is still a thing. When you take an old lady who's 58 or 60 or 62 and you smash her across the back with a dense piece of metal, she's going to live through that, sure. But she's not going to get up in prime fighting condition like this and start wrestling you to the ground. I think she's at a distinct disadvantage, being that she is at the age she is. Here we're gonna lose the head, and I'm glad they showed this again. The second reason I'm glad they showed this again is not just to remind the idiots at home or the idiots in the theater, but I'm glad we get to see the decapitation again. Although it was better in the first one because the camera lingers and her hand kind of does this, like it's like, where'd my head go for a couple of seconds, which I appreciated. I also appreciate the idea that they're going to take a movie that's like 83 minutes long. I mean, it's not a long movie. I don't know. That's not a quote. I'm not Don't quote me. It might be 87 minutes long. But this is not a 2-hour film, right? This is an hour and a half barely. It's already a relatively short movie, and they're going to front load like the first 5 to 10 minutes with shit that they already filmed the year before. It's like, let's take this hour and a half movie and let's just make the first 10 minutes like the last 10 minutes of the last movie, and then that's less work for us, right? It's like you got to write a 10-page paper. I used to love doing that. Write a 10-page paper for my master's degree, and I'm going to like quote a paragraph of this other scientific paper. I'm like, yeah, that's going to take up a nice chunk, and then we're going to double space it, italicize it, and it just, there we go. I just ate up half a page, and it was the easiest thing on earth. I like the idea that they're hyping Alice up before killing her, by the way. I'm going to spoil the fuck out of this movie. I mean, if you're watching a commentary of a film, hopefully this is not your first time watching Friday the 13th Part 2. I'll let you know how I feel about spoilers. If the movie is 40 years old, which this one is, I think this was 81 that this was released, maybe 82. This was released in 81 or 82. This movie is 42 years old-ish. I can spoil it. You can spoil it. It's a 40-year-old movie. If you haven't seen it, you know, you had your chance. You had every opportunity over the last 42 years. And if I spoil this film for you, respectfully, kiss my whole dick. But I am going to spoil this film in my commentary. So hopefully you're okay with that. She's back, right? She's like near Crystal Lake. She's not like on the other side of the country. So we don't have to think about Jason Voorhees like getting on a Greyhound with a bag over his head and like sitting on the back of the Greyhound with his mom's head in like a duffel bag or whatever, and riding this Greyhound across the country to Florida or something to stalk and kill Alice. Alice reveals over the course of this phone call that she is still carrying some PTSD, as we would call it today, from the events of the first film, which was just a few months ago within this, you know, this film, you know. She's agitated with a person on the phone. She's like, I got to go back to Crystal Lake. I chopped a lady's head off and I got to go back because, you know, I was traumatized. I cut that bitch's head off. She killed all my friends. So the idea is that she's near Crystal Lake, and thus she is kind of within Jason's range. We saw the exterior of the house in the establishing shot at the very beginning, and we can tell this is not an urban environment. I mean, the house looked humongous. Honestly, the house looked huge. So apparently Alice is a bit of an artist too. They didn't really go into that too much, but apparently those are her sketches, and they're like drawings that she made as a result of this. But we saw the exterior of the house. The house is huge. It must be whacked up into multiple apartments like they like to do here in New England. And because, you know, her kitchen's right outside of the bedroom. I mean, a large house, the kitchen would be downstairs. So it must be like she's renting the upstairs apartment or whatever. I don't know. I don't know if this is a long-term thing or a short-term thing. I don't think we're supposed to think about it too much. The idea, though, is that she's not in an urban environment where people would see Jason kind of coming and going. We got a little bit of like, this is the stuff where they copy Halloween, where they follow her in a continuous shot. So she opens the thing and she's looking out, and you think it's another Psycho moment. Like it would have been a bit of a copycat to kill her in the shower. You can't kill her in the shower. Psycho did that, but you know, of course, they were very obvious about killing or copying Halloween with these first couple of Friday the 13th films. And you could tell they kind of simulate the killer's point of view with the camera. And they follow her through the space in these long tracking shots, which is meant to kind of up the tension, as if she's being followed, and we can watch her performance as she's behaving in kind of this paranoid way. And we might think that she's paranoid. Her family, the person that she was on the phone with, they might think that she's behaving in a paranoid way because the killer's dead. You killed her yourself. But we're going to learn that that's not true. There's another killer out there. That killer has a deranged son who is also a mongoloid, which I believe is the proper technical term for when you're all fucked up like Jason is? Mongoloid. If it's not, it should be. Again, kind of following her through the space, it gives her an opportunity to perform. It also creates kind of a cinema veritas feel to this space. Like something about the first three, maybe even four Friday the 13th films that I love. It's one of the things that I feel like those first three especially, and I'll include the fourth one there too, because it came out hot on the heels of the third. I mean, they were produced back to back to back in the early 80s, like 81, 82, 83, 84. They came out in subsequent years with no year in between any of the first four Friday the 13th. So one thing that I think is just like really quaint and that I love so much about these movies is that they have this like very like authentic feel to them. They feel very authentic. And so following her through this space in these long continuous tracking shots, not only kind of difficult to achieve, also fuck that cat. I would put that cat in the goddamn microwave for giving me a heart attack like that. I got no time for cat bullshit. I got two cats. I should say my wife, my kids, they got two cats. I'm semi fond of the cats, but honestly, they pull some shit like that, I'm throwing them in the pool like fucking Kobe. I'm just yeeting them cats right into the deep end. Give me a heart attack like that, you fucking cats. Ice pick to the side of the head. It's a pretty brutal way to go. Jason is kind enough to take the screaming kettle off of the burner, which is just very thoughtful of him. There's a lot there to unpack. I think I'm done with the thought about the kind of quaintness and the very authenticity of these first several Friday the 13th films. They just feel so like of their time. Like this feels like 1981, 1982. Like it's just like texturally, like I feel like I could run my hands over this movie and feel the textures of this film. And it is that sort of gritty kind of smoking indoors, like doctors smoking around their pregnant patient kind of era of like human life. And I love it. I love it. I will also say that, they introduced Jason as the killer. And, you can tell that they don't really, they didn't really have a good like long-term plan. With the first one, Jason wasn't even a character. Like he was dead. Like the kid died, right? He was dead. It wasn't until this film they retconned it and they're like, oh yeah, maybe he didn't drown and he secretly lived. And instead of reuniting with his mother, he lived in the woods for 30 years and then somehow witnessed his mother's death after her rampage in the first film. He knew it was his mother despite not having reunited with her for 30 years. And witnessing her death is what kind of like switched him on to become a killer. And that he didn't kill over the course of the 30 years. He just kind of lived alone in the woods as this, redneck mongoloid in the woods. And fine. It makes zero fucking sense, but whatever. I will accept it without much complaint. But in this film, he is a little bit more of like a thinking kind of, he's sort of operational in a way that later Jason will not be. Later Jason is just, even by part 4, he's like not interacting with like normal things, like a tea kettle. He's like too mundane for Jason to touch, unless he's going to kill someone with it. So basically, like he's not interacting with his environment like a human being. Like a loud tea kettle is going off. You take it off the burner because that piercing sound hurts your ears. But like in this film, Jason's kind of a human being that would do that. He has ears and that sound hurts his ears. But in later films, Jason becomes like this. He doesn't care. He's not impacted by these mundane, these sort of normal pieces of reality. But this is exactly what I mean. Like this film has texture. Like, I love the small town feel, and they really lose it after the fourth film. But the first two, and then even the third one a little bit, like Crystal Lake, the town, not the camp, but the adjacent town. It's just so like, look at that. Like, you recognize the Exxon logo. That logo is more or less unchanged. Now, 40 some years later, you still see Exxons and the logo looks the same. But like everything else is just like the way this guy is dressed, that girl's hair. Look how frizzy that shit is. Look at how frizzy that shit is. They're getting towed. They're running through the street, but look at that small town. I mean, just look at the facade of that building. I just love it just has this authentic look. Like they found a location for this. A, because it's cheap. You don't have to build something indoors and then light it and then, hope it looks real. You just find a spot outdoors in, rural New York or rural New Jersey. I believe that's probably where this was filmed. I think later films were, I think, Georgia actually for part 6. They filmed in Georgia, west of Atlanta. So uh here, they're obviously just kind of filming somewhere on location, and you can tell it. Again, it has that real, like, it's, they're using real sunlight, at least for the most part. Most of their lighting is real sunlight. And again, this looks like a real place. It looks like a real backwoods kind of, the cornfield, the the three people in this, like, look at that pickup truck. That truck had to be the fucking coolest thing circa 1981 when this movie came out. Like, that fucking truck alone. Look at how it's lifted. It's jacked up. My brother would S a D for that truck. That broad riding in the middle, I bet she had an open beer too. Like, no seatbelts on. It's just one of those things that just kind of reminds you that, life didn't used to be quite as regulated as it is today. And come on, you're gonna pull over for that? That truck could totally roll over that. That's dead wood, man. Come on. Don't be a pussy. You've got a lifted truck for a reason. Just run that shit over. That should be trivial to you. Like, you need to get out and break your back moving that thing. And look at that frizzy hair. Look at that. For nothing says I'm not a professional actor like that frizzy fucking hair. Like, you watch the 2009 Friday the 13th remake, and yes, that film has its good qualities. I'm not going to totally shit all over the 2009 Friday the 13th remake. But you can tell. You watch that movie and everybody's kind of like, they've got the Hollywood hair and shit going on, the Hollywood makeup. I mean, there's just something that, like, they feel like real people because they're not recognizable. The first one, of course, had Kevin Bacon in it. So, you see Kevin Bacon and you're like, yeah, all right, that takes me out of it a little bit because we know how famous Kevin Bacon became after making the first Friday the 13th movie. But it was also kind of refreshing and nice to see Kevin Bacon get stabbed through the neck with an arrow. So, no major complaints there. As with the first one, we see the killer. We know that we're watching from the killer's point of view because we see the killer's hand. It's like a first person point of view shot. And we get to see through the killer's eyes. And we also have that connection to Camp Crystal Lake, of course. This is one of the Friday the 13th films wherein there is a camp involved. The first one, there's a camp. They're reopening Camp Crystal Lake. Here, there's a camp opening up. I think this is an adjacent camp. I don't think this is Camp Crystal Lake, but it's close enough that they found the sign from Camp Crystal Lake, and it's fallen over. It's, in the middle of the woods or whatever, and they were remarking on it in that previous scene. And the killer's eyes fell over that as well. And look, something else that you have to respect about these films, as we're looking at this shot right here, please, YouTube, don't take me down, is that they knew what they were about. I mean, they admitted to ripping off Halloween, which we're seeing with these point of view shots, and a little misdirect here too, because this guy comes out of the woods, and was it his point of view that we were looking at a moment ago, or was that the killer's eyes that we were seeing through? there's a bit of misdirection. I also like that. Like he shoots her in the butt with a rock and he's like, it was me. I have a slingshot. Zero lines of dialogue exchanged. She doesn't say anything to him to tell him to fuck off. He doesn't say anything to her like he's got a nice line. He's going to try to pick her up. He's just kind of like, hey, I got a slingshot. And she's all like, whatever. I got an ass hanging out of my shorts. I guess we're a match made in heaven. And so that's something that I respect about these films is that they're really not here to they're not here to try to fool you like this is high art or we're trying to make something that's you know, a social commentary on the state of violence in films. You know, this isn't video violence, for instance, which only partially works in my mind as a statement. But this film, they know what they're here for. They know who their audience is, and they know how they're going to get you to pay money to go see their film. You know, they know how they're going to sell tickets, and it's with a shot like that where they're following this girl. She's barely wearing a t-shirt and barely wearing some shorts, and the camera is going to linger on her physical form. This was well before the idea of the male gaze became this evil thing. So, you know, it is what it is. Um, you know, male gaze bad, male gaze evil at the same time. It's sold movie tickets, so let's just keep that in mind. That if I were making a film and I wanted to sell tickets, I would I would do nothing different than director Steve Miner does here. Um, Victor Miller, I believe, was one of the producers, writer, maybe. But what I would have done is the same exact thing. Let's get young girls to wear very little, and let's have a psychopath killing people in creative ways using pitchforks and other methods of violence. We'll do some good practical gore, and we'll keep the whole thing under $6 US, and that sells tickets, man. I don't Another thing about watching these films, the authenticity. I mean, look at this lighting. You can kind of see her face moving through this shadow here, right? Like as she moves, as she performs, you know, her body moves, her face moves, her head moves, and you can see, you know, the light kind of as she's passing, you know, through the light that's streaming in through the window. And again, it's like such a small detail you wouldn't notice that, but watch the shadow go across her face. That is, you know, lighting coming in through a window, and that is like a window pane in between casting shadow on her face as she moves. And it's again, it's subconscious, like you don't notice it unless I start yapping about it. But the idea is that it does create this sense of like an authentic space, like she's inside a cabin at a camp. It makes perfect sense, and it looks real because it is. I mean, they're filming this on location, you know, inside an actual building where light is streaming in from a window. And honestly, I don't understand why they quit doing it this way. I mean, it had to have been, you know, some, you know, question of profitability and doing kind of keeping things closer to home and doing it in a Hollywood studio. But for my money, the way that they made the first several Friday the 13th films, this is the way to do it, in my opinion. Especially with the second one here. I mean, again, like texturally, like look at that guy's flannel, the camp counselor, the head counselor. He's like the leader guy with the blonde hair and the fucking beautiful jawline. He's a handsome man. Um, I mean, I'm like pretty straight, and I kind of want to melt into his arms myself. Look at how he's got the top couple of buttons unbuttoned, showing off a little tasteful blonde chest hair, you know, and even taking one in the face. He's a handsome man, and it's important that she's a child psychologist. They're laying that down. I shut up at the right moment for her to mention that she's a child psychologist. But something else important to point out is that, you know, we are we are seeing the camp counselors during their period of training prior to the students or the kids, the campers coming. So there's no real campers. There's no children. There's no like 8-year olds, 9-year olds that are in mortal danger in this film, because then you have to deal with the idea of like, does Jason opportunistically murder an 8-year old that like he walks by because the 8-year old's like laying in their bunk, or does he really just focus on the adults? They eventually get to that in part 6. They kind of answer that question for us, but that's not a question for here. This campfire is a this campfire scene is a pivotal scene in this film because it does set up Jason as the primary antagonist. Um, I forget the character's name. The blonde-headed, handsome leader guy, the head counselor guy, the camp director. Fuck, I forgot his name. I really should have like a cheat sheet that I print out that has all the character names in front of me, but I was too busy creating this artwork that you see as the overlay that I'm wicked proud of, that no one appreciates. I showed my whole family that artwork that I'm using as the overlay, and everyone's like, "Yeah, that's nice. That's nice, Daddy. All right, shut the fuck up. Little Mermaid is on." Okay. At any rate, hopefully YouTube appreciates the thing. I haven't gotten a notice that they've pulled me down yet, so maybe YouTube is happy with it, and that's all that really matters. But this, again, texturally, like, look at that fucking sweater. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like screams 1981. Like, that is what you wear. Look at frizzy ass hair still. The campfire, again, it's sort of, it makes this sort of like this is the type of tale that you would tell around a campfire anyway. So it's almost like a parable here. But plays the prank on them. He had that well timed up with the guy in the mask. But the idea is that essentially what he said, despite it being like a practical joke, is essentially true. Jason is still out there somewhere. It has been 5 years since Alice went missing. The dialogue reveals that not only was she stabbed in the head with a ice pick, but apparently Jason did not leave her body there in the rented apartment, the Airbnb that she was murdered in. He apparently removed her body because part of the dialogue there at that campfire scene was that she disappeared forever. She disappeared into the ether. And again, this was a day and age where like people went missing. Like they printed motherfuckers on a milk carton. Like you went missing. Guess what? The next year you were on a fucking milk carton. And that was how they did it back then. They don't print motherfuckers on milk cartons anymore. That shit would have freaked me out as a kid if I was like sitting there at breakfast and I'm trying to eat some fucking Cocoa Puffs and like right there is the milk carton. I got to look at some kid's face who got kidnapped by the free candy van only to never be seen again. That's a little bit too depressing for my fucking Saturday morning cereal with my Count Chocula. But, it is what it is. Scott, old boy, does the dog survive? Question to ask yourself. Let's ask ourselves, is the dog going to survive? I know in today's day and age, in the 2020s, they don't kill off cute animals because the animal lovers would immediately hate the film. But you gotta think that a guy like Jason, he's a killer. There's no love in his heart, and he does not care if you are a dog or a person. He just fucking hates you, and he's gonna curb stomp you if he can. If you get within pitchfork's reach of Jason, you are probably going to be eating a pitchfork. So my thought is, yeah, he kills the dog. And he probably would opportunistically kill the 8-year-old campers too, if they were present at this point in time. I always watched this shit as a kid. And I'm like, if this is taking place in the summertime, why are they wearing so much clothes? Like, why are they putting on sweaters and sweatshirts and shit? And then I moved to New England. And outside the month of July, maybe, it's cold at night up here. I'll be swimming in my pool and it's like 50 degrees the night before in fucking June and August. It's wild. So I guess it's not terribly surprising if they're in a camp in Maine. I think Crystal Lake is meant to be in New Jersey. It's like technically where it's located, but they don't tend to be too specific about the geography. Don't pull me down, YouTube. Please don't pull me down. She's wearing a bra, YouTube. Don't pull me down. They're non-specific enough about the geography of the camp Crystal Lake that it's really, it's hard to imagine that it's in Arizona or, New Mexico or Texas or some southwestern state, but it's very easy to imagine this being a camp in pretty much any state, at least in the contiguous, maybe not Alaska or Hawaii, but it's easy to imagine that this is very like a camp in Maine or New York, New Jersey, or rural Georgia, or wherever you may live, Virginia. Paul is like, don't you dare take the Lord's name in vain before we get it on. All right, we're about to do some sinful shit. You don't need to make it worse by taking the Lord's name in vain. He's like, hey, I might be here trying to scare the shit out of you, but only because I heard that's what makes girls wet. All right. That is the only reason why I'm trying to make you shit yourself before attempting to make sweet love to you. Now, this guy, the one who's about to get garroted, whose feet we just saw, he's not the killer himself. He's the crazy old alcoholic character. And they have a few of these in the Friday the 13th films, because the crazy old alcoholic character is quite useful. They can either provide backstory, which he has done predominantly in the first one. He provided some backstory, but here as well, he functions to warn everybody. And it is a shame that they kill him, because he's a useful character. And also, he does seem to be a wise, he's crazy, he's insane, he's batshit, but he's not suicidal. He's not trying to get killed. And yet he goes to the camp, knowing the camp has a death curse. He's said many times in the first and in this film, he's warned people, you must stay away from the camp. If you go to the camp, you'll get killed. And he heeded his own warning in the first film. He showed up at the camp briefly during the daytime to warn everybody, but then he fucked off again before shit got dangerous. And here he was fucking around the camp at night, and he paid the price for it, also being a relatively expendable character. I do like these camp horror films like the first, the second. They kind of ditch the camp thing for 3, 4, and 5. They return to the camp theme for part 6, and then they ditch it again promptly for the remainder of the Friday the 13th franchise. But this is nonetheless it's Camp Crystal Lake. It's mentioned at least in all of the films. So I think it is, it's important. It's significant that it's a camp film. It's a film set in and around summer camps. And as much as I do like those type of films, I like Sleepaway Camp. I like The Burning. I like other, horror films that are set around camp. You have one big problem with horror films that are set around camp, and Friday the 13th is no stranger to this problem. Summer camp is a week, 2 weeks, a month, 8 weeks, maybe. It depends on the film, but it's at least, let's say, at least 2 weeks is the summer camp, the length of the summer camp. You can't have people dying kind of consistently over the course of the entire 2 weeks. Now that dog is in it right now. That's the killer's feet. And we cut to hot dogs burning. Like, we go from the dog encountering the killer, and we cut to hot dogs roasting over a grill. I think that dog is fucked. I think that is a semantic, a semiotic way, film semantics way of telling us that that dog met its end. And even in the early 80s, they weren't going to show us an innocent creature being murdered by the killer. But now the girl who doesn't like wearing a lot of clothing, I don't want to say hoe, she's kind of dressing like one. She's not very modest, at least. God help me if my daughters go out in public dressed like that. Please, Jesus. Don't let them do it, all right? Gotta take them to Catholic school or something. Scare them off of that type of behavior. What's that dog's name? Muffin? I gotta call Kaz and figure out if that dog's name is Muffin or not. The problem, though, is that, when the killer strikes, all of the events of the film really have to kind of take place over the course of a single night. Because if the killer kills somebody and then the next day everybody wakes up except for the dead guy, and they find the dead guy and he's been obviously murdered, like his head's been hacked off or he's been stabbed with a pitchfork and the pitchfork is still sticking out of his chest or whatever, or he's like floating in the lake with his throat slit, whatever, what have you. He's been harpooned through the eyeball. I think that happens in part 3. What I'm saying is that when the other 15 people find the one dead guy with the pitchfork, they don't just say, oh, well, that sucks. There must be a killer amongst us. Let's keep doing the normal camp shit and just, like wait for the guy to kill somebody else. That's not how it works, right? So what's going to happen is, as soon as they find this single dead guy, the other 15 people start freaking out. And they're like, we got to call the cops. We got to get the fuck out of here. We got to do something. We got to go. And for a human killer, such as Jason is here, I mean, yeah, he's a giant mongoloid woodsman, but even still, he's a human being. If cops show up with guns and they shoot him, riddle him full of bullets, he's fucked. He's dead. He's not part 6 Jason, where he's like a indestructible Frankenstein's monster / zombie. We'll get to that eventually, but here we are supposed to believe as the audience that he is a human being, albeit one that is tough and rugged and Mongolian. He would be very much killable. He's hard to kill because he knows the woods better than these kids do, and these kids, of course, aren't prepared to be murdered. He's catching most of these people unawares and by surprise, and that's how he does it. But all of this really has to take place over the course of one day. I can't believe they didn't see him. He's like right there on the side of the tree that they walked past, and they didn't see this fucking guy. He's also a giant. I mean, it would help if he was small. He could hide easier. But when you're like 6'3" and like 250 pounds of beef, and you're wearing a fucking burlap sack over your fucking head, you're pretty noticeable in the woods. He's not a fucking spotted owl that can just blend the fuck in. He is a fucking giant murderer who's wearing dungarees and work boots. Those are some ill-fitting pants too. Come on, buddy. See a tailor.
Oh my God.
What is it?
Looks like a dog.
Yeah, it looks like a dog. Too mangled to tell. But look, guys, that's the dog. Now we're gonna see the dog again at the end of the film. But
What are you kids doing out here?
what are you kids doing out here? What do you think, old man? We were looking for a spot to get naked and rub genitals, but then we found a mangled dog. And I'm thinking that's fucking Muffin. We're going to see Muffin again at the end of the film. I told you I'd spoil it. Muffin does come back, but Muffin is the tell that we're looking at a dream sequence because we know Muffin's dead. We just saw it. We know Muffin's dead. We're not going to see Muffin again until the dream sequence. And when we see Muffin again, we know that we're inside a dream sequence. That's the magic kind of, you're in a dream right now because the dog that was mangled is now whole again and wagging her tail. Muffin is back. So, we do get a sense of some authority here. There is a sheriff, a cop, a sheriff's deputy. I don't know what he is.
No punishment? What kind of place is this? Jenny?
Yes.
No seconds on dessert for Jeff and Tyler tonight?
No punishment? No, they're adults and they were going to go, well, they're probably 18. I hope they're 18. The way they were about to go get it on in the woods. Tell YouTube they were 18. Don't make YouTube worry that they're minors. I also brought a Diet Coke for when I ran out of Prime because my wife only lets me have a packet a day. She rations me, even when it's my birthday Prime. So I have a Diet Coke as well because this is my favorite beverage on the planet, on the whole planet. Now, the cop sees a guy go across. Like, Jason is normally the master of hiding. Even though he's 6'3", he's 250 pounds, and he's a mongoloid with a burlap sack. This dude still sees him go across the road and gives chase. And again, it gives us another guy to kill. So we don't run into that problem of like once he starts picking off camp counselors and they start finding corpses, all of the murder has to happen like boom, boom, boom. So they really have to push that off to the climax. And that is kind of the problem of a film like this is what do you do for the first 60 or so minutes? And how do you entice viewers in that first 60 or so minutes? So they have to invent some characters like I think Crazy Ralph is the name of the character that just got garroted against the tree with the barbed wire. And then they have to have characters like this guy. Now, he's a somewhat portly sheriff, but man, is he really cooking through the woods. He's doing pretty good. And he's chasing after, I don't know why he would do this. I mean, did the guy commit a crime? Is he going to try to get him for jaywalking? Like he just saw a guy cross the road, but it's not like he just saw Jason Voorhees dragging Alice's corpse by the hair, right? Like you saw a guy cross the road, but why are you pursuing him so doggedly into the woods where Lord knows what might happen to you? Why would you chase him? What is he a suspect of? Like there hasn't been, yeah, Crazy Ralph was murdered, but nobody knows that yet because the body was not left at the camp. So this really only enables us to see the ramshackle kind of pieced together building that Jason Voorhees has made for himself. Again, Jason Voorhees in this film is the type of guy who, it's not a sophisticated place, but he did spend time like putting together a little shack, a little murder shack for himself. And he does not clean the place. He doesn't waste time cleaning, but, he built himself a shack. And he has a few things. You wonder what Jason did with all of his time before he became a murderous son of a bitch. And you wonder why the fuck this guy walked in there. Again, you're chasing a guy who's not a suspect of any crime. There's no crime. He's not investigating a crime. He was only pissed in the last scene because, look, Jason's got a toilet. You have to wonder, like Jason sits there and poops. You don't really think about that in part 6 when he's like this zombie killer and he's in this impervious. But, like he's a dude. He eats squirrels and shit. So I'm sure he poops squirrels in his shit. But again, there not being a crime, he was really only at the camp because he found the 2 camp counselors like in the woods. Why he would pursue this woodsman to this really creepy shack or cabin in the woods and then boom, take the hammer to the head. It's really only so that they can include a few murders in the first hour or so of the film. And I would think Jason Voorhees is going to bring some heat on himself when he starts murdering lawmen. It's one thing to pick off Alice and then she disappears. If you clean up after yourself well enough, maybe the ice pick to the head, Joe Pesci style, always reminds me of Goodfellas. Goodfellas didn't come out for another 10 years, but Jesus Christ, put on a real shirt, okay? You're going to get me yanked off of YouTube, you hoe. Somebody tell that woman, put on a real shirt. Also wear a bra. Everybody can see your nipples. The 13-year-olds in the audience are quite happy with that, though. The 13-year-olds in the audience are like, I'm fucking buying this when it comes out on VHS. I'm going to get the fucking VHS of this. I can't tape this off cable because fucking TNT is going to edit those nippies out. I love the subplot involving the wheelchair kid. This girl, also that she's showing a very blatant interest in him, right? We all see that. I do love the idea that like, yeah, he's a wheelchair kid, but it's not like, oh, we need to feel bad for him because, he had like polio or he got like some kind of weird spinal cancer. And, like, I like that this film doesn't waste any time making you feel like, oh, he's got a sob story. Like, yeah, he's just a character in a wheelchair. They don't really talk about it. It's not something that like, they don't mention it again. But this girl, the girl in the purple, she's like all about him. Like, I don't know if she just heard he's got like a monster hog and he's got less sensitivity below the waist. So like he takes him an hour before he busts or what. But like she is all about him. And it's really kind of cute. Like she's a very cute young lady. She's all about the wheelchair kid, like, right? Like, I mean, she's like, she wants to marry him. The only reason they don't get married and have little wheelchair babies, you don't pass it down like that, right? It's not heritable. I think the only reason that they don't get married and have little wheelchair babies is because Jason murders them both before this night is over. We've kind of split up. That's an important thing in these films as well, is that characters, you know, when it's night, you know, the nighttime, the sun goes down, and you know, characters start going their own ways. You know, characters, these two go off to make love over here, and this hoe right here is going to start taking clothes off and going skinny dipping, etc. They have to break the characters apart. What's interesting is this set of characters here. It's kind of unique to this film. This set of characters, there's two carloads. The older counselors go into town and they go drinking. They just find this, you know, they find this this restaurant that's open late, plays music, and it reminds me there's a spot down the street from us that my father-in-law absolutely loves. It's called Trains, and it is a, you know, it's a pub. They've got a large bar. They've got two bars. It's extensive. Don't get me yanked off YouTube. Is this covered up? Somebody tell me that this is covered up and YouTube's not about to yank. Oh, thank Jesus. It's covered up. I could not remember if there was actually any nudity in this this one or not. Friday the 13th films are like hit or miss. There's some nudity in the Friday the 13th, and in some there's not. And I couldn't remember if this was one or not. And oh, YouTube is about to crank me over that butt crack. YouTube, it's just a butt crack, okay? It's just a butt crack. Don't yank me, bro. But they have to break the characters up, and sending the characters to town makes a certain amount of sense. They took that kid's truck too, which I guess sucks for him. And one of the characters named Ted, who went to town, he's a redhead who went to town. He's the kid with the red hair. He's the ginger kid. Therefore, he has no soul. And yet he doesn't get killed by Jason. He's the luckiest son of a bitch in this film. I mean, dude, this girl, I mean, like, she is about to get down on one knee and propose to the wheelchair kid.
I only want your fingers.
What?
Take your pick.
Hey,
They're Ted's. It's okay with him.
football and hockey. Which one do you prefer?
Football and hockey. I won't be playing either one except by using this little box. So, you know, hey, video games. If you lived long enough, you could have gotten an Xbox and then you could have played some NCAA football. Because he does look like he has the makings of a varsity athlete, to reference Sopranos. Oh my gosh, did you guys see that? You guys watching, somebody in the chat, tell me if you're seeing nudity on YouTube or not, or if I've got it appropriately covered. Is that the killer stealing her half clothes, or is that the guy with the slingshot? He's gonna shoot a rock at her vagina because that is how he does foreplay. I don't get it either, but apparently that's how it worked in the 80s. Are we seeing that? Oh my gosh, that's like, I hope that's covered up, because that is like a little bit of, like, it's a long shot, but that was a little bit of full frontal. Ugh, I'm gonna have to cover these better in the future. Friday the 13th, you about to get me fucking nuked, and this is my main YouTube channel, you fools. Tom says no, he doesn't see any nudity. Thank you, Tom. I did see a little bit of butt crack that showed through my fair use cover. Let it be known, I have stated publicly here on this live stream that she needs to wear more clothes, okay? This is one of the films, you know, Jason uses traps. He doesn't really do that again until the 2009 Friday the 13th remake. He uses some traps in that film, and we see like a more cunning kind of, you know, strategic Jason that sort of knows how to set traps. It makes sense. If he's been living in the woods for 30 years, he must know how to trap a game in order to eat food. So, she's like, don't go anywhere, because you know, you shot me in the ass with a slingshot earlier, and that's pretty much all it takes to turn me on. So, all right, let's do it. So she's going to go cut him down. And I guess they're not totally freaking out because that could be a practical joke. Earlier in the film, they kind of set up that the camp counselors, especially the head counselor, you know, he's got a little bit of a sense of humor and that he's okay with them playing around a little bit. He's okay with the adult characters going off into the woods for some hanky-panky, and he's all right with a couple of practical jokes around the camp. So, you know, he's not freaking out as he's hanging upside down because he knows that his girl is about to go get a knife to cut him down. But then also, I guess he's assuming that this is all in good fun, you know, because sometimes you get hogtied, all in good fun. Where is she? But now he's about to realize, I love these movies. Like, there's a strange man who's grabbing me by the hair and he's about to cut my throat. But instead of screaming, I'm just going to watch. Like, my eyes will get really wide, but I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to say, who the fuck are you? And, you know, try to fight or anything. I'm just going to very passively, even though I've got 2 free hands and I could try to hold the knife back off of my throat, I'm just going to hang here and take it while the strange man with the burlap sack over his head cuts my throat open, empties my jugular while I'm hanging upside down, which was a very effective way to... Wouldn't he be leaking all over the ground, though? Like, she would be standing in a large amount of blood right now. She wouldn't have to turn him around to realize he's dead. That is that is a sensible response to, holy shit, that guy got his throat slit. That's a very sensible response. You would fucking scream and start running and seek help and try to alert everybody because, you know, that's freaky shit. And here they are at Train's Tavern. Train's Tavern is the name of the place that my father-in-law absolutely loves. Today is his birthday, too, by the way. Gosh, we should have taken him to Train's for his birthday. Today is his birthday, the 13th of September. It's my father-in-law's birthday. We're going to celebrate with him tomorrow. We'll hang out with my in-laws tomorrow and have some dinner with them. But so, like, you know, they just go to the camp is close enough that they can drive into town. And again, this sort of gives you, without being super specific, it gives you the idea that there is a small town that is near to Crystal Lake that, you know, it makes sense that you would want your camp to be somewhat close to a small town. The camps where I have previously worked and volunteered have been close to kind of small towns like Wolfboro, New Hampshire. Small town, you know, and it's a 30-minute drive from camp to town. But, you know, if you got to go because you need to stock up on a Diet Coke, for instance, I'm not going 2 weeks of summer camp without fucking Diet Coke in that fridge. So,
Child trapped in a man's body?
Again, it's that time, right? She can say frightened retard. You can't say that these days, but back then she didn't mean any harm by it, right? I mean, it's like when my grandpa says the N-word or something. It's like he thought he was being nice when he said colored, you know? But it's, you know, grandpa, it's not how we do it anymore. That's not how we speak politely. This is very important dialogue again. If you haven't watched this film without me yapping through it, then, you know, pay attention to this dialogue next time you do. But here she's kind of unpacking the Jason Voorhees story as if it's a real thing. I mean, they all know of the Jason Voorhees story that he told around the campfire earlier in the film because, you know, it's a story. It's one of these urban legends that can exist in the early 80s because there's no internet, right? There's no Google Earth where you can see Jason's little murder/fuck shack from outer space, like a satellite image of a police officer with a claw hammer in the back of his skull outside of Jason's little murder shack. That's another thing that I love about these early Friday the 13th films, that you know, that charm is gone for the 2009 remake. That sort of like real authenticity and real like texture of the film is gone for the remake because people had cell phones in 2009. I ought to know. I was one of them. But here it's like you could have an urban legend like this Jason guy and not know if it was real or fake, because what are you going to do? Go to the library and find an old newspaper on microfiche? I mean, you could, but even then, if it wasn't published in the newspaper, you might not know anything about it, and you might never know. And you know, there was a lot of things that we believed in the late 80s and early 90s because people just said it happened, and you just had to believe these people because there was no internet, there was no Wikipedia, there was no way to verify it. If it wasn't in the goddamned Encyclopedia Britannica in the library, or in a newspaper article that you could look up, a Time magazine article that you could look up in the library physically, you just, yeah, okay, it's an urban legend that this Jason Voorhees guy still exists, and maybe he's responsible for the disappearance of Alice. And I do like that at the bar they've had just enough to drink. Like, this is an important story beat. They don't just go to the bar randomly. Like, they need to go to the bar as characters to, yeah, they're getting away from camp, and it helps logistically split the characters apart so Jason can start picking them off. It works for the film, but it also works for the story because you need the Ginny character, that's the girl with the psychology degree. You need her to drink a few beers and to sit there talking to Ted and her boyfriend, the lead counselor guy, about like, she has to have 2 beers in her to take that urban legend seriously and to, like, seriously kind of unpack it mentally. And that's why that conversation she was having is so significant, because, you know, she's really kind of analyzing what Jason's psychology might be like. That provides important information, expository information for us as viewers. You know, he's just sort of like simple. I don't know about retarded, but, you know, maybe I'm using the word mongoloid because it's less specific. We don't know that he's got extra chromosomes. We don't know that he's got Down syndrome. We don't know that he's retarded. We do know that, you know, he's been living in the woods for 30 years, so he's probably not extremely literate. He's probably unaware of Macbeth and Hamlet and other works of Shakespeare. He was never forced to read Great Expectations, Dickens. He has no idea who in the Dickens is. That was stupid. I'm sorry about that joke. That was lame. If you unsubscribe, I will understand for that stupid joke. But we know that Jason is, you know, he's smart enough to lay traps, and he's cunning, while not being, you know, super educated, and maybe even a little bit, you know, either like super traumatized or possibly a little dusting of the downs, a little downy dusting, a little downy dust on Jason Voorhees, because we do know that he had birth defects. He was a mongoloid as a child. He's a mongoloid as an adult. And so what Jenny's also doing with that conversation as she unpacks his psychology is that she is also kind of foreshadowing how one might deal with a psychopath like Jason. You're not going to, like, as she holds the underwear up to the mirror, she's like, obviously doing that for the camera. I like it though. She's like, you know what? I'm about to get it on with the wheelchair kid, and I've been wearing this underwear since this morning. Let me take it off and put new underwear on. And for some reason, the one is sexier than the other. It's not like it's lingerie or something. It's actually kind of quaint and cute that she's like holding up this like very regular pair of panties and like, oh, this is my cute pair. But it's not like, you know, like I said, the remake, she would have been holding up some like super freaky lingerie or something like that. They would have had to have dialed that like that. Oh my God. Her intentions for this wheelchair kid. I mean, that poor wheelchair guy. I feel bad because they never quite got to the point of, you know, like they're just dancing around each other. They're about to have a really great 2 weeks at camp together. You know what I mean? And get married. I think that this broad is going to propose to him and they would have little wheelchair babies, except they are both about to meet their end in an unfortunate way. I kind of wish they'd survive too, because like I said, the wheelchair guy and that girl, I feel like they're a cute couple and I like them. I'm fond of them. She's not shallow. She's kind of shallow because she's like, you know, I'm about to have my vegetables. He's not a vegetable. He's just in a wheelchair. He's obviously not catatonic. He's, you know, he just doesn't work below the waist. And I wonder how that translates to sexuality. I do. I wonder, like, you know, if he's inoperable down there, you know, if he's paralyzed from the waist down, and you start rubbing his dick from the outside of his pants, which is something that all of us heterosexual men love. I think gay guys like it too when you rub their penis. They just don't like it when girls do it. So I don't even know what I'm saying right now. But anyway, rub a guy's dick from the outside of his jeans. It's a no-brainer. Gay or straight. No-brainer. But would he know that you're even there doing it? Like if he closes his eyes and you start grabbing his schmack, not you, but she starts grabbing his schmack, is he going to know it? I've often wondered that. But he's about to eat a machete in a very literal way. And this is one of the most savage deaths in this film. Of course, the rain pouring down, the lightning, it really sets the right tone, I think. And I love that camp, that light. You know, they would have lights around the camp. It makes sense. And later, Friday the 13th, they just, for some reason, have these bright floodlights in the middle of the woods with no explanation. But that's obviously it's an exterior light. They have exterior lighting on the cabins, and that makes perfect sense. But I love how you get that rainwater falling through its. Of course, the depth of field is not there, so it's out of focus. But it's just perfect. And then he just eats the machete and the wheelchair. Here's why he's in the wheelchair. They wanted this shot. This long shot of him rolling backwards down the stairs in the wheelchair. That's the only reason to put the character in a wheelchair. It's not significant to the rest of the film. They just had an idea and they thought, what if the wheelchair guy gets killed and we get to show him like rolling down the stairs dead instead of like falling and tumbling like John Wick Part 4, which is really pretty stupid. It would make people laugh. That's just like, fuck. Oh, like he gets it really fast. And then he tumbles backwards down the stairs in his wheelchair. And you're just, holy shit, dude. I don't know how he didn't see that coming. Like the back of his head, the shot of the back of his head made you think Jason was sneaking up on him. But he takes the machete in the front of the face. So it's like, all right, well, what is it? Is Jason in front of him and he's just not saying anything? Or is Jason sneaking up on him and like reaching around him to machete him in the front of the face? But here we're supposed to believe that this is not a plastic spear. It was obviously part of the Jason outfit from the campfire practical joke. That would be a fake spear, right? You're not going to go get a real spear for a practical joke. You're going to go to Party City if they existed in 1981, and you're going to get a fucking fake spear. I looked it up. This film was released in March of 1981. So this is 81. I know I said it was 81 or 82 earlier. I looked it up. And it was March of 81. This is an interesting kill. I mean, she doesn't scream. She like that sharp intake of breath, but Jason definitely gave her time to scream. That is an important character death. Note that character death. The girl that was underneath the dude, the girl with the wicked frizzy hair, she, the actress was like 15 at the time of filming, and she lied about her age. And they originally filmed some nude scenes. And when they found out that she was like she was like grossly underage, they were like, holy fuck, we just made CP. And they cut all the nude scenes out. And I think they destroyed them because they were like, holy fuck. Like she lied. This was back in the day. Like, again, like, you know, you could just show up somewhere and be like, yeah, I'm 18. There's no way to verify it. It's 1981. What do you want? They actually filmed nude scenes of her that they had to like yank out of this movie quick before they released it because they're like, holy shit, like she's 5, she was like 15. She told us that she was 18, and we thought it was legal to film her titties, and it was totally illegal to film her boobies, and it was fucking hilarious. So she is also important. That character is important, not just because the actress was way too young, but her brother within, you know, not her, the actress's brother, but the character's brother is a character in Part 4. He shows up to avenge his sister's death, despite Part 4 being set roughly 3 days after the events that we're witnessing. How would he have known? How would he have gotten there that fast? I don't know. But in Part 4, there is a handsome male character who is eventually dispatched by Jason Voorhees. But that is the brother of the girl who got double poked. I like to think that the boyfriend was still inside her, like she was being DP'd. She was being double penetrated because boyfriend is still in her, right? In the very in the very primal sort of way. And then Jason was like, yo, let me get some of that too. And, he put the spear through both of them and turned it into a menage a trois. And she was double penetrated at that point. Oh, this poor girl. I mean, she's looking for her wheelchair would-be husband, and he's already been whacked in the face. And she's about to find a corpse, and Jason. And another corpse strung up behind her. Again, kind of, here's where we really get a look at Jason too. Like, we get to kind of see how he's dressed. We get to see we get an impression of the size of him. And I think it's important that we get that reveal a little bit later in the film. We sort of, as the audience, we wonder what he looks like. We wonder what this killer looks like till the end here. And then we get to see him kind of towards the end again, when it's like, holy fuck, like, that's an impression of him kind of sitting up. The blanket falls off. He's still got that burlap sack over his head with a single eye hole. And yeah, that's pretty fucked up. I mean, it's not as iconic as the hockey mask becomes, but it's like nice and fucked up. A scary thing to see just before he murders you. And you can imagine how a young woman like that would be like paralyzed with fear when this hulking brute of a mongoloid with a bag over his head sits up. And again, you can tell that they are taking cues from the first Halloween in the way that Michael Myers was this silent killer with a mask, and he preyed on young people like this, and he also sort of staged his kills in a way that would make a very bad impression on the people who found the kills, right? So he staged those two bodies, despite stabbing them together, skewering both of them while they were in bed. He got the guy up and kind of like strung him up against the wall, and then laid down in bed with the other corpse. And so, you get the sense that it's not just about the kill. For this version of Jason, this iteration of Jason is very much about like that theatric, like he wants to also scare the fucking shit out of these kids. And he's kind of staging things and sort of, the Jason that comes back from the grave in part 6, even Jason in part 4. I mean, he was just killing people and just leaving them where they lie and not dragging their bodies to showcase somehow. I mean, it was really just kind of, he'd stab you, he'd kill you, he'd leave you there, and sucks to be you, nerd. They just found a massive amount of blood in that bed. They didn't find a body yet, but obviously that's not a normal amount of bed blood. I don't know how much you bleed in bed, but people bleed in bed sometimes. I'm thinking mostly menstruation. It happens, it's biology. It's a little yucky, but I'm not about to shame someone for menstruating. That's perfectly natural. So here's where Ginny and her boyfriend, the camp director, are going to learn that Jason, the legend, it's not just an urban legend. It is, and it's odd calling it an urban legend because they're very much in a rural environment. Do you have a rural legend? That doesn't sound right. It's an urban legend, even though it's not urban. That's too nitpicky of me, but Paul is the name of her boyfriend. God damn, it took me to this moment of the movie. I like how she's just like, let me lock Paul in there with the fucking killer. I don't give a fuck if that killer is in there and he's pulling Paul's pants off right now, just getting in him. I don't care. I gotta lock that door. The survival instinct, right? Self-preservation instinct is very strong. But Ginny is about to use her smarts too. Like, she's the final girl in this film, not just out of sheer luck, but she has a particular skill, a particular talent with psychology that will allow her to survive. Again, the film, I think, they've been pretty honest about the fact that the early Friday the 13th were really attempts to cash in on the success of Halloween. I mean, they're very honest about that. I still think that they're, despite bearing some similarities, maybe in some crucial spots, stylistically, I still think they're very different films. Similar in the sense that Halloween makes this suburban environment on Halloween, this night that's normally very fun for kids, it turns it on its head and makes it very dangerous. And these safe places like your home and your street, where everybody knows you. You grew up on this street, right? You know all the neighbors. The idea that, oh, he held on to that guy's body for a while. It's like 2 days later, he's like, I'll use this. At any rate, Halloween kind of turns that friendly suburban environment on its head. And then the Friday the 13th films do something very similar for the idyllic kind of camp environment. And I've always liked that as well. I mean, I have fond memories of my years as a camper and even working as a nutritionist at a camp, and very fond memories of that experience. And so these movies, it's like it takes this experience that for everybody should be, a fun thing, nostalgic thing, and it introduces this sense of like mortal danger to this environment that really should just be like safe and fun for children. You're gonna go swimming, and if you're 17 or 18, you might have some sex in the woods. But if you're 8, you're gonna make some arts and crafts and go swimming and canoeing and shit. And maybe you'll have a crush on somebody. You'll eat some ice cream. You're gonna have a great couple of weeks. These films kind of turn that on its head as well, and sort of the idea of Halloween, that there's like this sort of unknown kind of danger to the holiday. That Halloween is based on these older Celtic traditions that do involve this kind of mortal danger. That it's only been in more recent decades that Halloween has kind of become a kid's holiday. It's sort of there's something similar here, where it's like, yeah, we have this idyllic kind of, oh, camp is nice and the woods are pretty, but maybe that is a more recent kind of thing too, and that in previous ages, centuries ago, maybe many decades ago, pre-World War II, it's like the woods wasn't a super friendly place. It wasn't like this kind environment. It was, it was more dangerous and menacing. And whether it was like murderous mongoloids or like bears, there was the idea that maybe there was some danger to this environment. And so there might be a parallel with Halloween in that sense, but the fact that Friday the 13th chose a very rural, kind of small town camp vibe, I think really does help to differentiate it, especially as Jason becomes less of a, here he is more of a knockoff of Michael Myers. And he's running. You don't see that very much, but in this film, you do see Jason. That's at least a pretty heavy jog. It wasn't a full-out sprint like, the Olympics or anything like that. But and again, some very naturalistic lighting here. These backwoods would not be lit by any exterior lighting like the camp was. She's running through the woods, and the moon, that full moon, is the only light that there would be. And she's you could tell she's lit in a way that, yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense that she's running through the woods and she's ill lit. And again, it's a very naturalistic approach that these horror films, I'm afraid, really kind of ditched after this. That you have to appreciate the 1981, that early to mid 80s era being like the heyday of the slasher. This kind of came out at the peak of a slasher, the popularity of the slashers. So, as these things became more profitable, and this film helped to pave the way for viewing this as like a profitable model for a film, I think they did wind up, sinking more resources into the production of these films, and that resulted in films that were maybe a little bit more produced, Hollywood backlot, day for night shots, interiors that were lit and dressed up to look at like the outside. Keep your mouth shut, lady. The fuck is that? Did that rat just piss, or did she piss? No, she didn't wet her pants. Come on, lady. You ain't wetting your pants. The rat pissed. I guess. I don't know what that liquid was. Had to be urine, right? Like, where else are you going to get the liquid? It had to be the rat, like, just came right by her face and just pissed right by her face. That rat was like, fuck you, lady. Oof. She got lucky right there. That chair broke. That's like I tell my daughters, don't stand on no chairs. Them fucking things are not going to hold you up. You're going to fall and hurt yourself. Look at her. She's like, fuck, crank that fucking chainsaw, man. If it worked for Leatherface, it'll work for me. She's really democratizing violence. And here is, you see Jason as a human here. Again, he's got human vulnerabilities. You could shoot him, you could stab him, you could set him on fire. He would die. He's vulnerable. Granted, he's very strong, but he's vulnerable. I say, don't just leave him in there. You smacked him with a chair. That's good for WWE. But I think you need to get a little bit more lethal with him. I mean, if we learned anything from the first film, it's that, Alice would knock Pamela Voorhees out. Alice must have knocked Pamela Voorhees out 3 times before she cut her head off. But, she'd hit her once, Pamela would fall down, and then Alice would kind of stumble away, like with this presumption of safety. But, like, look, guys, we need a little bit more of a killer instinct out of these 20-year-old girls. Like, you guys need to fucking nut up a little bit. He's down, but he's only going to be down for 30 seconds or whatever. He's going to come to pretty quickly. You need to get the pitchfork up, and you need to start making some holes in the guy with the pitchfork. And that's really the only way that you're going to ensure your survival. I don't know why she would run into this thing looking for help. Like, this isn't the fucking murder guy's shack. You know what I mean? Like, this shack belongs to anybody but the guy with the fucking bag on his head. But here's where, she realizes, I don't have the fortitude or the strength to fight this guy off. I knocked him out once, and I was too pussy to get the chainsaw out and sever his head while he was laying down. But, it is what it is. She's going to use psychology. Instead, she's going to put a dead woman's sweater on. It's pretty stinky. Apparently, he retrieved Pamela Voorhees' body, at least her head, after it was severed in the end of part 1. In part 4, I believe it is, near the beginning, we do see her grave. We see like a headstone. It says Pamela Voorhees on it. And since these films, part 2, 3, and 4, take place over the course of several days, you have to imagine that the grave is already there, right? Because part 4 takes place like 3 days after part 2. And so they just buried her without the head, I guess. Here she's kind of rolling the dice that he's retarded and that he's like mentally confused enough that he would believe that she is her mother or she is his mother. Because that's a gamble. Because if he didn't buy it, if he's not retarded enough to believe that and to go for that particular gamble, I mean, he would just gore her with the axe. But she makes it work, and Jason's obviously like he's fucked up enough in the head. He hasn't had his medications for 30 years. He partially drowned. I don't know if he got some brain damage from that. Who knows? Or he was just born that way. You have to remember that Jason Voorhees was born, I believe, in the 1950s. I think he would have been born in the late 40s or early 50s in order for him to be attending camp in the late. I think he attended camp in 56 or 57. So, he would have been born circa 1950 in order to be like camp age, in order to drown in Crystal Lake in 1956 or 1957. So, during that era, it's not like people knew better. His mom probably was smoking and drinking. Oof, that looks painful. Paul is still alive. Paul is back, and I don't know how he knew to follow them to the shack. I felt like she was running in the woods for like an hour, but he knew. Follow her to the shack, and he showed up. He's a lucky dude because most guys don't survive these movies. They'll keep the final girl around, you know? You got to have a final girl, but it's not like final dude. So usually if you got a penis, you're pretty much donezo in these films. You're not going to make it, unfortunately. But yeah, as I was saying, I'm pretty sure Pamela Voorhees probably smoked and drank during her pregnancy with Jason, which really kind of explains everything you need to know about Jason Voorhees. And she sunk that blade. Look how deep that blade went. That is beyond the collarbone. That's like past the collarbone. That would have gone pretty deep. That might have even got the aortic arch. You know, the aortic arch is a piece of anatomy where, you know, the blood returning from the lower body is pumped back through the heart. It returns to the heart to again pump through the heart, and that's how, you know, blood can go down to your toes and then, you know, get reoxygenated by the lungs. They can't just stay in your toes, right? The blood has to circulate, and so that aortic arch is part of what returns the venous supply to the heart, and that arch goes over the heart. I mean, if you get in there deep enough, you can whack that aorta, and that is going to cause very rapid blood loss. Where if you're in the middle of the woods and you fuck that aorta up, there's virtually no chance of survival. But you know, these movies again, they run up into the problem of, hey, it's a camp movie. We have to kind of have all the action happen in one night. The murders can't, you know, you can't be picked off one by one like in other movies. Nightmare on Elm Street films, those are notorious for, like, you know, character dies and a couple nights later another character dies, and Freddy kind of torments people over a longer period of time, where Jason is like, he's got to get all his action in one night, because any survivor in the morning, they're gonna get the fuck out of there. Makes perfect sense, of course, as one would. As I spake earlier, there's a dream sequence at the end of this film that we enter very seamlessly. You can't really tell when they entered the dream sequence. It might have been as they were stepping back into the cabin, very likely. It could have even been in Jason's cabin in the woods. But we know that we're in a dream sequence because someone outside the door. It's not really. It's Muffin. Muffin is back. However, we also saw Muffin's corpse, mangled and brutalized. Get that pitchfork ready, lady. Look at that. It's starting to look like the cover, my fair use cover. There it is, right there. So they're worried that Jason's back, that Jason's alive, and that she didn't actually sever his aortic arch, causing him to bleed out rapidly and die. Of course, we know that she didn't. He's got the shovel ready. You don't look ready to hit someone with the shovel, though. You need to wield that shovel a little bit more effectively, dude. For a man with such a chiseled jawline, I would expect better of him. But there you go. Get that shovel overhead. Get ready to swing that thing. It's fucking Muffin. Oh, the dog is alive. The dog is not really alive, guys. We are in our dream sequence. The music even tells you. There's that little, I don't know, I like to imagine some lady in an orchestra is like playing the harp. When you hear the harp strings, it's obvious you're in a dream. This is sort of the faux happy ending, of course. And there we get to see this nice slow motion shot that reveals to us, you know, this is what Jason looks like. He's got long hair and a beard because he doesn't shave and he doesn't cut his hair. He's got the one wonky eye because as a child we saw that, you know, he's deformed. His mother smoked crack while she was pregnant with him, thanks to the CIA. And it is an effective reveal. But we also know that that was a dream, because he would not have left her alive for the next morning for her to get picked up by the ambulance. She's also wondering where the hell Paul is. There's no indication of Paul the next morning. So maybe Paul didn't survive, and Paul's presence in the latter moments of the film was an element of the dream as well that she had. We know Ginny survived. We know Jason did not leap through the window and attack her, because we see in the opening moments of part 3 him getting up and he's in his shack where he fell after Ginny cut open his shoulder. He accumulates a lot of damage over the first 3 movies, but he just, shakes it off. Kept waiting for those eyes to open too, but alas, they do not. Thought that would have been cool, but they do not open. You gotta give it to them. The music in these films. Henry Manfredini is responsible for the music in these films, and it is good. And that's why I really think, the Friday the 13th films, even from the first film, they really differentiate themselves and set themselves out not as a cheap knockoff or imitation of Halloween, but really a very genuine attempt at making an entertaining slasher in its own right. And they might be ripping off Halloween a little bit, but again, I think they established their own lane, their own territory well enough in these Friday the 13th films that I forgive them of any influence that they may have received from the Halloween films. Because I think what they wound up creating was, it just stands on its own enough as a slasher film. I think all slasher films, when they're kind of taken seriously, they do have a lot in common. And these first few Friday the 13th, speaking of taking them seriously, these first few Friday the 13th have very few comedic elements in them. They're not very tongue-in-cheek. They're not very self-aware. That was really something that came with the later 80s as the slasher genre started to wane in popularity a little bit. As the slasher genre started to wane in popularity a little bit, we let's see, let's go back to this overlay and let's pop that out of there and go back to here. Here we go. All right. As that later 80s came on and the popularity of the slasher genre began to wane, we do see like more meta kind of self-aware slashers become made, slashers that sort of understood what they were. In this early 80s, they were still putting out these very genuine, very earnest attempts at horror films that did not contain very much comedy. Really, I think about the only intentionally funny thing is when Paul is helping her fix the car. She starts it and the exhaust hits him. He gets hit with all the dirt and debris in his face. And that's really kind of the only comedic, he takes it in the face. And that moment, I guess, is meant to be funny, but the rest of the film is really meant to be kind of straight thriller / horror. The characters are in real mortal danger, and there are real consequences to everything, and so you kind of feel that. You feel that very much with those early 80s slasher films, which again, there's just something about that era, again, that I love. It works so well for an earnest horror movie. I think nowadays, with the technology that we have, if you make a horror film that's set in the modern day, you make a 2024 horror film that's set in 2024, you really do have to deal with all of this modern technology that we have and all of this information that's at our fingertips. And so an urban legend about Jason Voorhees and maybe he survived and maybe he's out there somewhere. I mean, it works so well in 1981. It works so well for Friday the 13th Part 2, but would it work as well nowadays? I mean, there's so much about the internet that's kind of spoiled the magic of life. I mean, I'm not a Luddite trying to tell you that cell phones are bad, because everybody loves internet porn and pirating movies. I mean, cheers to that. But on the other hand, there is the sense that these urban legends quickly become verifiable. I mean, you can quickly find the information that would disprove urban legends. So, you can't suspend your disbelief the way that you once could. And I remember being young and I had older cousins. I have older cousins. They're still here. They would tell me all sort of wild shit when I was young, and it was really, it's sort of like, well, I could believe them or I could not believe them, and if they made it sound believable enough, it's like, well, how am I to know? Yeah, they're usually full of shit, so maybe they're pulling my leg, but at the same time, if there was some credulity to the story, then you could believe maybe that Jason Voorhees guy did. I heard he drowned, but I wasn't there. It was the 1950s. Maybe he didn't drown. Maybe they just thought he drowned. Maybe his mom was crazy. I mean, she didn't know if he was alive or dead because she got off her fucking medication or whatever. So the whole thing is really, it works very well for the time frame. I think this era of slasher films is great for that reason. You don't have people recording things because they have a 4K smartphone in their pocket. They could record 4K video and put it up on the internet and like, here's the Jason guy. I'm live streaming Camp Crystal Lake right now, and the cops are on their way. You do get the sense that it's just a little bit easier for all of these events to play out as they did, and feels more believable for the era that it's in versus nowadays. It's like, oh, come on, man. You'd be on Instagram live and everybody'd see the face of the killer and the cops would be on their way and they'd be flying a helicopter over, and he's not outrunning that. So I guess the horror film these days, you got to be a little bit more creative, or you just got to do a straight up period piece and be like, this is a horror film set in 1950s, like The Conjuring or whatever. Conjuring is the 70s, right? I said the 50s, but the Conjuring films are period pieces set in the late 60s and 70s, I believe. But you can do that as an option as well. But that was Friday the 13th Part 2, you guys. I do enjoy spending an evening on Friday the 13th watching a Friday the 13th film. To me, it's like letting Christmas pass without watching Ebenezer Scrooge or Bad Santa or National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. I mean, to me, there are films that you should watch at the holidays, this being one of them. I don't know, Friday the 13th isn't really a holiday, but in observance of the day, I think it is best to watch. And this is the first Friday the 13th film, and currently only Friday the 13th film that my daughter, Evelyn, my 5-year-old, has watched with me. She didn't really watch it. She was about a month old, and it was 2019, Friday the 13th, and it was September of 2019, and she was about a month old, and she slept on me, and I cradled her in my arms, and I was rocking with her while watching Friday the 13th Part 2, because it was Friday the 13th, and it was like 10 o'clock at night, and the house was quiet, and that's really kind of a nice memory. Like, I was rocking with her, she was sleeping, while Jason was getting his fuck on, and the house was quiet, all the lights were off, and I was just holding my baby girl and watching Friday the 13th Part 2. And so that's a little piece of nostalgia for me as well. I appreciate you guys joining me on this adventure. For those of you who are patrons, I will be posting this with the video uncovered, the video that we were just watching together. I will remove the cover so that you can watch it with full frontal nudity. You can see all of the murderous killings. I will post that to my Patreon because YouTube cannot stop me. It can't. I can't do nothing about it. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, thank you. Please subscribe to this Movie Mass YouTube channel if you haven't already. And you can watch it and rewatch it here because it'll be posted here. It'll just be covered up because YouTube oppresses my creativity, and they repress me. And honestly, I feel kind of raped by YouTube. I don't feel like they did me dirty. At any rate, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Friday, the super spooky Friday the 13th. We've got 15 minutes left before it's the 14th, and then we got to stop celebrating. So here's to you guys. Thank you again for joining me. Hit that subscribe button. I'll kiss you on the mouth next time I see you. And until then, until it's mouth kissing time, peace, motherfuckers. I'm out.